Good morning and welcome to Metro Activities on October 27th. First, we have our Finance and Capital meeting. I'm Matt Letourneau, Chairman of the Board's Finance and Capital Committee. Since this is our first meeting of the day, I'd like to ask Metro's Chief Safety Officer, Teresa Impastato, to give us our safety contacts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to Metro headquarters. In the event of an emergency alarm sounding, please exit through the doors of entry, walk out into the vestibule area, and coordinate with the security guards who will coordinate an orderly evacuation from the building if one is needed. There is an AED located in the hallway. In the event of a medical emergency, I will retrieve the AED, and the security will coordinate with contacting all first responders. Restrooms are in the hallway, along with water fountains. Riders on either Metro Rail or Metro Bus are able to increase their safety by following a few key tips. When using Metro Rail, if you drop an item onto the tracks, do not attempt to retrieve it. Contact the station manager for assistance. Flashing lights on the platform edge will warn of approaching trains. Do not stand on the platform edge. Door chimes alert passengers to stay clear of the doors as they open or close. Always allow room for departing passengers. When using Metro Bus, never run after or alongside a moving bus once it's left the stop. Play it safe and wait for the next bus. Never assume that a bus operator sees you. Lampposts, newsstands, and double-parked vehicles may obscure views. Do not cross the street in front of a bus unless it is stopped at a traffic light and you have the right of way. Use caution and look both ways when walking past the front of a bus to cross a lane of traffic. Always wait for your bus on the sidewalk, away from the curb, and make sure it's fully stopped before approaching. And lastly, do not allow children to play near buses. Roughhousing, pushing, or shoving may cause accidents. Hold children's hands when a bus approaches. For additional information and guidance for the public, see the rider guide at WMATA.com. This concludes our safety contact.
Thank you, Teresa. And since this is our first public meeting of the day, I will ask the Board Corporate Secretary to call the roll.
Thank you. Mr. Letourneau?
Here.
Babers?
Here.
Mr. Ports? Ms. Klein? Here. Mr. Smedberg?
Present.
Dr. Lowe? Present. Ms. Martin Proctor? Thank you. You have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Ellison. So our first order of business for the committee meeting today is to approve the agenda. If there are no objections, we'll consider the agenda approved as presented. Are there any objections by members of the committee to the agenda? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. Now to the approval of the minutes. We have the minutes of our October 13th meeting. Are there any objections to the minutes as presented? Seeing none, we'll consider the minutes approved. We have two informational items on today's agenda. Hopefully we won't need those AEDs, but we have a lot of material here to cover. They're both designed to provide more context around Metro's budget. Staff will review the current outlook for the FY 2024 operating budget and provide concepts to reduce the projected FY 24 operating budget shortfall. We'll also discuss several potential future service and fare concepts, and I want to emphasize future service and fare concepts that will help us better adapt to the customer's needs. And some of these are coming back to us because the board has requested information about these scenarios and how some of these concepts might work. So I believe that I am turning things over to Mr. Anasike, and I am sure, Dennis, this is probably your last meeting with us, is it not? It is your last meeting. So again, thank you on behalf of the board for everything you've done for us, and we're going to miss you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Dennis Anasike, but it's my pleasure to be joined here today by Yetunde Olumide, Metro's acting CFO. We're here today to update the Committee of Metro's fiscal outlook for FY 2024, starting with the budget calendar and sharing additional concepts for the committee's consideration as part of Metro's effort to close the remaining operating budget gap for the next fiscal year. As we previously discussed with the committee, Metro's FY 2024 process will be much more transparent than in the past. And the budget timeline that this committee is used to will be extended to accommodate additional input from the public. The new process, as laid out on the slide in front of you, will include additional outreach to customers and other stakeholders beginning next month, but more fundamentally continuing through spring of next year, as Metro is required to have public hearings in the District of Columbia, the state of Maryland, and the Commonwealth of Virginia. The updated timeline calls for Metro's FY 2024 budget to be presented in December, which still allows the authority adequate time to submit federal grant applications well before the start of the fiscal year. With respect to the budget itself, as this committee is aware, Metro continues to face a large operating budget gap for FY 2024. At this time, however, staff has identified additional measures that will reduce the gap by almost $40 million, primarily through additional efficiencies as well as top-line revenue improvement. As you can see from the top of this slide, Metro's original revenue estimates were conservative as we, as an organization, responded to COVID. But as more customers continue to return to the system, staff now projects revenues will increase by an additional $6.4 million, plus an additional $5 million tied to Metro's fare evasion reduction initiative. When you look at the second line, it shows that non-fare revenues will also increase by a total of $17.1 million, including $3 million in additional advertising revenues and $14.1 million from joint development activities. In addition, Metro will eliminate purchases, consolidate operations, and eliminate an additional vacant positions to reduce non-personnel costs by $10 million. All of those efforts will still leave the authority with a $146.2 million funding cap. With that, Mr. Chairman, I will turn the presentation over to Mr. Limide.
Good morning again, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. If Metro were to close the remaining $146 million operating budget gap through service cuts to Metro Bus and Metro Rail, approximately 20 to 25% of revenue service hours will be eliminated. This scenario will reduce Metro Bus and Metro Rail operating budget by $73 million each, resulting in FTE reductions of 750 in Metro Bus and 440 in Metro Rail, respectively. This scenario does not factor in reductions in ridership or the corresponding loss in passenger revenues that would result from these service reductions, nor does it consider impacts to bus and rail vehicle and infrastructure capital investments. It also ignores, for now, potential external concerns regarding laying people off while using federal COVID relief to help balance the Metro's operating budget. Alternatively, Metro could also choose to increase customer fares as a way of addressing some or all of the remaining operating budget gap. In that case, and simply as an illustration, a 5% fare increase on Metro Bus and Metro Rail could generate $9 million and reduce ridership by 3 million trips. Alternatively, if Metro chooses to increase customer fares by 25% on Metro Bus and Metro Rail instead, Metro could generate $44 million in new revenues but experienced a ridership reduction of about 19 million trips. The committee saw this chart previously, which shows Metro's operating maintenance, federal grants, funding, and preventive maintenance allocation to capital. In FY24, maintenance expenses will grow to an estimated $700 million on the left side of the chart, while the total capital program will grow to an estimated $2.5 billion, due in part to the increased federal funding from IIJA in the upper right corner. The deep blue areas in each fiscal year represent the amounts of federal grant funds the board authorized Metro to use in support of preventive maintenance activities. IIJA increased Metro's federal grant funding by about $125 million annually, starting in FY23. This chart responds to several questions from board members regarding definition and best practice for use of preventive maintenance. FTA defines PM as maintenance, and transit agencies are required to report annual PM expenses to NTD as part of its audit process. There is no best practice regarding use of PM among transit agencies. Compared to peers, Metro uses less PM to operate and capital budget, as shown in the bottom right quadrant. For peers not capitalizing maintenance, those agencies tend to have direct, dedicated revenues that support operations. With that, staff seeks committee direction on which concepts Metro would use in developing Metro's FY24 operating budget. Mr. Chairman, that concludes our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Yetende. I'll open up to the members of the committee, but I will start with just a question. So going back to the sort of the first slide that you showed, one of the questions, I think, obvious questions is, could Metro reduce service to close the budget gap? Not that that's something we would want to do, but if we had to. And you, I think Dennis made the point that we would still, for the next fiscal year, be operating under the restrictions that came with the federal funding, which included not laying off, not reducing headcount. Now, we would run out of those funds at some point during the fiscal year, but it's your belief that, at least as we go into the fiscal year, that's really not on the table for us because of those restrictions, right?
That is accurate. While we continue to receive the federal funds, we are unable to lay employees off, and reducing service would require us to lay employees off.
At what point during the fiscal year do you think that we will fully have expended the federal funds?
With the current burn rate, I expect within Q2 to Q3 timeframe.
Okay. I have some other questions, but let me, Ms. Baber.
Thank you, Chair. I just have one question. So the slide that showed that we could increase fares by 25% indicated a revenue of $44 million. However, we need $146 million. So can you clarify for us where would we get the remaining amount, even if we increase fares by 25%?
So, thank you, Board Member Baber. So none of these options, but taken singularly, would close the budget gap. So this one before us for the 25% fare increase would only generate the $44 million of revenue impact.
Okay, so the board, we would still need to look at other options.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I do just want to note for the record that Mr. Ports has joined us remotely. Ms. Klein.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of questions about the preventive maintenance. Can we go back to the first slide that had that on, and yes, that one. Actually, the one that has the comparison to peer agencies, that one, thank you. You mentioned that that there are other agencies that don't use preventive maintenance, that don't use federal funding for preventive maintenance, that tend to have their own dedicated operating funding source from some other source. I was curious about the selection of just federal funds for preventive maintenance.
That is correct.
Okay. So this is a selection of peers that do, but there are a wide range of agencies that do not.
Yes, Board Member Klein.
And the 60 million that the board has already sort of authorized as used for preventive maintenance from the federal funding, that's already built into the baseline, right? So that we're already assuming that level is
That is
used.
accurate.
Okay. And I guess I'm not sure who is best positioned to answer this question, but I'm curious about all of these options that are on the table for reducing this budget gap have trade-offs associated with them. I think part of our job, obviously, is to figure out which are the trade-offs that are acceptable and which are not. In turn, I think this is one that's a little bit harder to understand what the trade-offs are. I think when you're talking about increasing fares or reducing service, it's pretty clear what the impacts of that are going to be. It seems to me that the impacts of this are that we are shifting some funding out of what would traditionally be a capital program into the operating budget, still to address, real maintenance needs. But can you say anything about what is the trade-off here? What comes out of the capital budget if we shift these funding? What are we not able to do?
Sure. Thank you for your question again. So in the short term, there is no direct impact to the capital program, but taken over several years, over a longer time period, if we have an increased amount of preventive maintenance transferred to the capital program, then yes, there will be changes in the amount of project delivery that will be available.
Okay, thank you. Those were my questions. Thanks.
Other questions? I will just ask a few and then maybe make a few comments. You did ask us for input, after all, about what should sort of be on or off the table. So I think, generally speaking, the concepts that we've advanced today should all be on the table. In particular, fare increase, particularly a small one, does not generate a ton of revenue. As you know, I've sort of pressed on some of these elasticity model questions that show ridership declines. My understanding is that's sort of a standard formula that is not necessarily specific to our moment in time or our particular system. Is that
That
fair
is
to say?
accurate, yes.
Okay, that's sort of a standard industry model. I've heard some feedback from other folks in the industry that oftentimes those things don't quite materialize the way that the model shows. I do think that it will be important for WMATA to show that we're trying to reduce the gap ourselves. And so, to me, a fare increase, even a modest one, should be part of the package that moves forward for greater discussion. Because certainly everything around the world, especially around here, has gone up in price. I think it's been 5 years since Metro's had a fare increase. Is that right?
Yes, thereabout.
They're about 5 years. So obviously we haven't provided the level of service that we've wanted to over the last couple of years, but I think that's changing and improving, and we're getting back to where we need to be. So I think that is something that should be on the table. As far as the use of preventive maintenance, we have to, I think, really continue to drill down into exactly what functions we're talking about and what the appropriate uses are. I am concerned that we will run out of our dedicated capital funding somewhere in around probably the 28 to 31 scenario. And so I wouldn't want to do anything that accelerated that by much, because our state of good repair program has a long ways to go. I think there's a tendency out in Metro world to think about that as something that's in the past because we had so much discussion about it in the past, but in reality, we're still, you know, you like to use football analogies. I don't know what yard line we're on, but we're not in the end zone. We're not in the red zone yet. You know, we have a lot of work to do, and I want to make sure we can still do that. That said, given the increase in federal funding that we're receiving, it's reasonable to look at an increase here in that transfer as part of the solution. So that's my feedback. I don't know if anybody else wants to offer theirs, Mr. Weber.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, particularly with that last point, I agree with you. And, you know, the messaging around that, I think, is going to be really important. And so people don't think we're doing away entirely with preventative maintenance, because I think that's going to be the first thought people will have. Second, Yetunde, is there something, could we get something, if we do keep a fare increase on the table, could we get another scenario where we're at 10% or 15%, something, sort of in the middle? Here we're at the two sort of extremes, and, I think, to be fair about it, while the models may not be perfect in terms of their ultimate outcomes, but if we could look at least at a 10% is another option, somewhere, something in the middle.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Clark.
Thank you for that comment, Chairman Member. So we'll do that for sure. We can do a lot of optionality with that. One thing I just want to kind of maybe put a little pin on with fares, right? There's clearly, we are not into precision modeling, right? And especially post-COVID, I think it's fair to say that, if we knew that, we'd all be time in the market today and probably not sitting at the table, right? But with that said, there are kind of normal trends and elasticity with fares. But that's like an isolated variable. So if we're willing to also have conversation, I know later we're going to talk about different fare concepts, that would change these as well. And I just want to kind of make sure we're all kind of talk to that. So for instance, if we had a low-income fare program, people that are more sensitive to price increases, we probably could actually have a larger fare increase and have less drop in ridership, or even increase ridership, because people that could maybe afford more are able to handle those fees, where people that are lower income are not impacted by the higher fees. And so there's different ways to kind of get to where we're after here. These are obviously pretty clear, kind of one variable at a time. And as you get to multi-variable play, the models then get more complex, but the reality is we probably will have less downward pressure on ridership and help balance financial too. So after that other discussion, which is coming later again, and we want to be very clear, that is future. But future could get tied into FY24 if the board has some ideas that we want to pull in earlier and stuff that we can push out to later. And if the board would like, we can kind of not only do individuals, Chair, as you've mentioned, but some more kind of multi-variable scenarios that I think would actually give more context around this.
Yeah, and totally agree with you. But I just think we want to have as much information as possible, because these are going to be really important decisions moving forward, and it's going to set a lot of expectation. And so I just want to make sure we have everything available so we understand the complete picture.
Perfect. We will do that. The last comment I want to make was on the federal side, and there's no question if this does basically your earlier drawing from capital for the operating side. With that said, and I think the context around this is really important, without the bipartisan infrastructure bill that the president signed, this would not be a really good option for us. Quite frankly, we'd be in very big challenges. So both the President and Congress should get a lot of credit, and the Secretary and the FTA for all of their work, and we really appreciate that. I think these slides help give the public that understanding. A lot of people talk about these big ribbon cuttings with new bridges and rail lines, but the actual part of the bill that was fantastic was this increase in formula funding that allows us to do that. Second, we have to actually probably do a better job, and we'll lean into this, on communicating the vast amount of capital money, while we're not at the finish line, that has actually been deployed here. So Andy and his team, through Tom's support and his team's support, has deployed better part of probably $10 billion since the true kind of more state of good repair crisis of 2015, 2016. And those things now are basically help push the state of good repair on those items even further out because of that capital deployment. So we'll think about how we can better, like you said, give narrative around that, because that is an important story to tell publicly, and we probably need to lean into that more.
Well, and also what Andy and his team and others have done before him, that we actually have a preventative maintenance state of good repair program.
Yeah.
A proactive one.
Yes, yes. We are programmatically in a much better place, and the team deserves a lot of credit for that.
Dr. Love.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I understand what we're talking about here as we talk about preventative maintenance specifically. So I need, like, we have to take some baby steps here. Preventative maintenance is part of the operating budget. Is that right?
That is correct.
And what makes it unique in the operating budget is that it is eligible for this, we can apply the same kind of funding to it that we apply to capital maintenance expenses under FTA guidelines.
That is accurate.
I see this chart here that has inspection, maintenance, and repair of vehicles checked. That means that our entire preventive maintenance line item is that activity?
Absolutely. So we have preventive maintenance on different aspects of vehicle and facility maintenance across the authority, Dr. Lowe. However, what we transfer at this time as part of the $60 million is the inspection, maintenance, and repair of vehicles according to the FTA definition.
Okay. And I mean, maybe this is a little bit of an outsider's perspective, but it seems like WMATA has experienced absolutely extraordinary costs on that line item this year, and that we anticipate that next year as well.
We have had increasing costs in maintenance this year, correct?
So, I mean, I appreciate, like, everyone's concern and that this is, like, different than how we've accounted for this in the past, but what's happening is different than what's happened in the past. So to me, this just makes sense. I don't see a smoking gun here. So, okay, I think I understand what's going on. And Matt, I think you had a really good point about, like, how we haven't delivered the budgeted level of service at all this fiscal year, and ridership is still increasing. So clearly there's, like, multiple variables at play here. And Brittany, I think what you said is exactly right about how, like, we're going to have to think about this in a multivariate way in order to come up with a proposal for FY24 that is forward-looking.
Okay. Anything else on this discussion? So just to be clear, there was a timeline in the beginning. General manager is going to present a budget. We're pushing back a little bit into December because we're having more of this discussion now. But, you know, this is still sort of in the beginning stages of the discussion. You know, we haven't made decisions today. We're just sort of keeping things on the table for discussion. Okay. So the next part of our meeting is looking at potential future and service and fare optimization concepts. And I think, as the general manager said, some of these things potentially could be incorporated in the FY24 discussion, but these are things that the board wants to look at as longer-term items, I think, irrespective of what our particular financial situation is or within the context of a budget cycle. So looks like, Mr. Webster, you were leading us. I will, just for the committee's knowledge, I have to go take a phone call at 10:30, so I'll excuse myself during that time. Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee and the board. Again, Tom Webster, Strategy Planning Program Management. There is a lot of content here. I'm going to work through this quickly, try to hit the key points, or as quickly as I can, but there are more than 50 slides, so apologize for that in advance.
It only took 2 hours in the pre-brief, so everybody just chill out, relax.
Thank you. So we are pleased to be here this morning to discuss opportunities to adapt service and fares to best serve Metro's customers and maximize Metro's value to the region. Metro and the region can build on recent service and fare changes implemented to align with evolving travel patterns and to support the region's recovery, and growth. This morning, we'll discuss concepts, not proposals, that could align with and advance Metro's values and priorities. The focus of this morning's conversation is on fare structure and on Metro Rail service optimization concepts. And this complements the Better Bus Network redesign effort that has launched recently. So transit benefits our customers and also the entire region. Service reliability, frequency, quality, and ease of access and use advance goals and values of our customers, communities, and the region, including access to opportunity, equity, safety, economic development, mobility, and environmental sustainability. So I'll begin with fare optimization concepts. This time last year, October last year, this board adopted fare policy principles. Those fare policy principles seek to make our fare system easier to use and understand, better matched to customer needs, more equitable, and to support Metro services into the future. Importantly, these principles guide the development, the evaluation, and the consideration of potential fare policy changes. When the board is looking at changes to fare policy, there's an important trade-offs between multiple goals and outcomes. One of the key considerations is simplicity, or the balance between simplicity, making it easy for and possible for easy as possible for customers to use, and complexity in having multiple price points that align with customers' sense of value for the money spent, for their money spent, and achieving revenue and ridership goals. And all this has to be balanced with the core value of equity, providing equal access and quality of service to people of color and low-income customers. Metro's current fare structure is complex, with a strong link between price and service used. Fares are charged based on the distance a customer travels on the rail system. Specific fares are set between, from each station to every other station. Distance between stations is the average between the straight line or the aerial distance and the actual track mileage between the stations. Then a mileage rate is applied to that average distance, but the rate depends on the time of day and the total trip distance. Rates are higher during peak periods, but a flat $2 on late nights and on weekends. We also charge a flat $2 fare on most bus routes. Recently, the board enacted several fare changes to promote ridership and make the system easier to use, including free rail-to-bus transfers, flat fares on weekends and late nights, lower prices for pass products, and including combination passes on regional services. So it takes time, as there are many dynamics for ridership to respond to fare changes like this, but our initial indicators are that our customers are responding positively. Ridership reductions and changes in travel patterns have reduced fare revenue. Metro's fare revenue now covers a smaller percentage of the operating budget than it did before the pandemic. That means that any increase in fare revenue will cover a proportionally smaller share of the operating budget. And then importantly, fare payment is only one part of the total trip and the total customer experience, and there are many touch points along the customer's travel journey where Metro can focus improvements in terms of ease of access, communication, and accessibility. As we discuss specific changes to fare structure and pricing, it's important to consider the principles and the goals. Ideally, a fare optimization should make it easier for customers to figure out, buy, and use their fares. ensure that race and income are not barriers to transit, retain some link between the price paid and the value received, and ensure revenue for the sustainability of the system. There are a variety of fare concepts that the board can consider, some of which are changes in price levels, like an across-the-board 5% increase or some other increase. Others are more structural and will require more consideration and are more significant changes, like moving from a distance-based fare to a zone-based fare structure. So the primary consideration in our fare system can really be split into two things: fare structure and fare pricing. This morning, we're going to focus on 4 general concepts for rail fare structures: of fare-free system, a flat fare, zone-based fares, and improving the current distance-based system by making it simpler and easier to use. And then pricing tactics are relatively more straightforward than those structural changes, not the focus of this morning's discussion. So globally, there's no clear standard or consensus on best practice for fare structure, though there are some regional patterns that you see on this slide. Flat fares and zoned fares are more common in Europe, South America, and the US. Distance-based fares are more common in Asia, but also on commuter rail and longer hybrid networks like metros, BART, and Seattle Sound Transit. So the first concept, and again, not proposals, just concepts for discussion. The first is a fare-free system that would no longer charge customer fares at all. This would fundamentally remove any income-based barriers to transit and certainly attract more and new riders. Fare-free would increase ridership and crowding that would have to be managed. But removing fares charged to customers doesn't mean free service. It would require full subsidy, and that subsidy would grow over time. Fare-free would really be a fundamental change in our region's approach to transit, shifting from customers paying a portion of the cost of the service to full public investment to fund all operations, maintenance, and capital costs. Another concept is to set a single price for all customers and all trips on rail. In other words, a flat fare. Staff has done some preliminary modeling and analysis to estimate potential ridership and revenue impacts for basically 3 concepts: a $2, a $3, and a $4 flat fare. While a flat fare would clearly be much more simple and a simple structure and easy to understand, transitioning from a distance-based fare structure to a flat fare at any price level poses some considerable equity considerations and potential Title VI issues. And at a high level, a higher flat fare would increase fares for a very large number of riders, most likely disproportionately impacting low-income and minority riders. And a lower flat fare would decrease fares for riders that are proportionally higher income and less minority as a percentage. So there are some significant challenges in moving from a complicated distance-based fare system to a flat fare system, although it would be much more simple to understand. The next concept is a little bit more involved to discuss, and it's a zone-based fare system. There are many possible ways to configure a zone-based structure and zone boundaries. For example, you could draw boundaries for different types of stations, or by jurisdictional lines, or by distance from a center point. And there are a lot of policy levers to determine price points and how zone fares might be charged, such as charging by zone pairs, or charging based on the number of zones crossed. And then there are a lot of pricing considerations built in, or to consider. Ridership, revenue, and equity outcomes of a zone fare system would depend entirely on how it is structured and on pulling which of the policy levers are pulled. So to illustrate this, our team has done some examples to support the discussion and to demonstrate trade-offs. So this example uses zones based on distance from a center point, in this case, Metro Center Station. Staff developed 3 concepts, a 3, 4, and 5 zone system based on the distance from Metro Center. Distance-based zone fares, again, has simplicity, trade-offs between simplicity, avoiding large price jumps before or between zones, and having more price points that maintain a link between service used and price paid. So I've got 2 more examples here, a 3-zone concept and a 5-zone concept, again, using that distance base. The 3-zone concept certainly increases simplicity with fewer zones and a limited fare table, but again, a weaker link between price and service used. It would also often result in longer trips within one zone, costing considerably less than shorter trips between zones. This next slide shows a 5-zone concept that tries to retain a simple fare structure that's easier to understand, but has a larger range of prices. More zones allow for smaller price jumps between zones when trying to maintain revenue neutrality. And under this scenario, fare decreases and increases are largely balanced, 20% each, through though a slightly greater share would still experience a significant, more than 10% increase. So some sample trips under that 5-zone model. Again, using 5 zones, distance from Metro Center based, taking the red line from Tenley to Union Station would cross just one boundary, and the price would be 20% lower than it is today. A trip on the green or yellow line from College Park to Columbia Heights would cross 3 boundaries and see almost a 30% increase. And a blue line trip in Virginia from Franconia to Pentagon would cross 4 boundaries and also see a 30% increase in regular fare. So at a conceptual level, zone fares might offer a number of opportunities for improvement, reducing the size and complexity of our fare table, maintaining a link between price and amount of service customer uses, but it can also result in long trips in one zone costing less than short trips between zones, as well as loss of price-sensitive customers who see a fare increase for those short trips. While there are some interesting aspects of the zone concepts, it's clear that there isn't at least based on our initial analysis, a simple, elegant zone structure that would be easy to transition to from a distance-based system, or easy to quickly communicate and transition to. Next concept is the possibility of simplifying the structure and use of our distance-based fares. There are several concepts that could reduce complexity, basing distance only on the straight line or the aerial distance rather than this combination of straight line and distance on the rail system. Eliminating the different peak and off-peak fares or regular and discount fares, rounding fares to the nearest quarter for ease of understanding, and then having only one mileage rate. And then fares, customized fare maps at each station that show fares to every other station. So there's an example on this slide. We could aggressively market pass products to tourists and infrequent riders. And we could potentially put easier to use fare calculators on the web and eventually on future ticket vending machines. Another potential path is to allow small negative balances so customers don't have to struggle with our exit fare machines. So all of these strategies could make the current fare system simpler and easier to use. It would mean fewer changes for customers and easier communication about the change. And with the right tools, it's possible to have customers have a better understanding of the fare that they're paying and keep that linkage between price and use. Conclude this fare policy section with a discussion of potential low-income fare product. Low-income fare product, as Randy mentioned earlier, could help advance our equity goals. Metro serves many lower-income customers, particularly within the bus system. These customers are more likely to be sensitive to price, and fares represent a higher share of their income. A discounted fare program with lower cost barriers, and also many of our peers across the country currently have low-income fare programs. This slide outlines a potential example of what a low-income fare product could look like, how it might work. In this example, customers enrolled in a qualifying means-tested program would be eligible for a 50% fare discount. And the image on the right is an example of an eligibility verification interface. Again, a number of factors and policy questions that would need to be considered in designing a low-income fare program. However, it's fairly clear that a unified regional program run and administered by Metro could have significant benefits for our customers. Considerations in designing a program like that include eligibility criteria, verification, the amount of the discount or the rate of the discount, distribution costs, as well as outreach and partnerships to ensure awareness of the program. Lastly, there's some other possibilities longer term for improvement after our next budget year that do require fare technology and system changes and upgrades. These include fare capping, where we could set a maximum amount that a customer pays per day or per some time period, regardless of how often they ride or where they go. This, again, encourages ridership and promotes equity, so you don't have to upfront pay for a pass, but pay as you go and have a cap on the amount you pay. And there are also opportunities that we will continue to pursue for regional fare integration with our partners across the region. So that concludes the fare policy section. I can move now into the service and fares, unless there's rail service optimization. I will do that. Okay. So on potential Metro Rail service optimization, there are three primary opportunities to pursue. The opportunity to grow ridership, improving customers' access to destinations, advancing equity and increasing access to opportunity, and optimizing the use of Metro in the region's assets to get the most value out of the systems, the investment in the system. As we all know, Metro's ridership profile has changed. A smaller share of customers are riding the rail system at peak hours, and those rail trips tend to be shorter than pre-pandemic. For context, Metro is a hybrid system. It was built to serve two different fundamental categories of transit trips. The system design intentionally combined aspects of regional rail with urban rapid transit. The regional rail parts of the system include long-distance journeys, often auto access to stations and parking at stations. Those trips tend to compete with car trips for journeys to core destinations. The urban rapid transit parts of the system generally include shorter trips, walking access, bus connections, bike connections to stations. Metro's hybrid design was intentional, designed to serve both markets, with high-capacity design, designed as an entire system with planned transfer points at key locations. And the design encourages frequent service by interlining services at the core and can provide high-frequency service in the rapid transit market while providing reliable scheduled service from suburban regional rail stations. There's an opportunity for Metro to continue to build on this hybrid concept in ways that are complementary to each other. Most Metro Rail customers use the central part of our system, regardless of their point of origin, so traveling to or through the center part of the system. And just for some stats, within 3 miles of the system center are 34 of the 98 stations, 60% of station entries and exits, 18 of the top 20 ridership stations, and about 3/4 of the weekday exits before 10 a.m. and about 3/4 of the weekday entries after 7 p.m. occur within that 3-mile radius of the center of the system. Service is also most frequent in the center part of the system, but that service is not evenly distributed, nor does it always match where customers are. Current service frequency mostly reflects that interlining of services. So the Blue Orange Silver service between Roslyn and Stadium Armory is the most frequent, with those 3 interlined Blue, Orange, and Silver services. There are some key links close to the center of the system that have less overall service, including the Yellow Line Bridge and the Southern Green Line. And importantly, not all branches have the same level of service today in our baseline budget or historically. So there's an opportunity to increase core frequency and both boost ridership in central areas and benefit long-distance riders. Increased service frequency in the core means more trains where there are more customers and where they are. Increased frequency in the core also provides regional benefits. Shorter transfers allow access for all riders, opening up opportunities for riders across the system and across the region. And just a reference point, about 1/3 of Metro's customers transfer between lines. So as an example of the power of what what increased frequency on multiple lines can do, an example of a customer who starts with a short walk from Anacostia Metro Station. By increasing frequencies, that customer could see a 50% shorter wait time for a Green Line train, a 50% shorter wait line for a Yellow Line transfer, and a 20% shorter wait for a Red Line transfer. That's possible by potentially increasing frequency on the Green and Yellow Line and in the center part of the Red Line. Those changes would open up new areas for a 30-minute trip, increasing access to jobs for a customer who boards at Anacostia Station. So another point of emphasis here is there is some synergy and some gain from improving frequency on multiple lines, in that the transfer speed also, or transfer wait time also. From an infrastructure and railcar standpoint, how are we able to do this? Metro has limited but a few places in the system where trains can be turned around for concentrating frequency in certain segments. Those are at Grosvenor Station, at Silver Spring Station, and at Vernon Station. We are not currently using or in the planned baseline budget those turnback locations. Historically, Metro has in the past used those as a way to concentrate frequency where customers are. We also have, when the railcar fleet is fully available, capacity to deploy more trains in service to increase frequency. In addition, the region and our partners have made a substantial investment in the Metro system, both capital and ongoing operating and maintenance. And there remains an opportunity, because many of Metro's costs are fixed, or most of Metro's costs are fixed and don't vary with service, to add service frequency at a relatively low marginal cost compared to the overall cost of the system. So for a fraction of the annual operating budget, add service frequency in a number of locations. This is a slide the board has seen before. Our team has been looking at service optimization concepts across the major trunk lines of the system, the green, yellow, red, blue, orange, and silver, and also looking at ways of optimizing maintenance of the system for potential future long-term operating hour changes. I'll now step through the concepts, starting with the first and most promising of the concepts the team has explored. That's changes to the green and yellow line that would see increased frequency on both the green and yellow lines south of Mount Vernon Square that would effectively match the frequency of the northern green line. Really what the opportunity here is to increase frequency in areas that are the fastest growing in our region, places where there are stadiums for sports and other sport games and other events, major entertainment venues, the airport, the new Potomac Yard Station, growing areas in Arlington and Alexandria. This would also reduce, as I mentioned, transfer time significantly at Gallery Place and L'Enfant Plaza, benefiting all customers who transfer in the core of the system. What this looks like is essentially doubling the frequency of service south of the Green Line when the rail cars are available to do so, using the turnback at Mount Vernon Square. There's an opportunity to access potential ridership here at a relatively low marginal cost, and improve service frequency for, again, those growing parts of the region. Next concept is optimizing red line service, providing more red line service in the busiest segments of the system, realigning to improve core frequency and serving the growing areas with approximately similar level of total service. By using the turnbacks at Grosvenor and Silver Spring, we could have frequency benefits for about at a ratio of about 4-to-1 compared to the overall line. What that would look like for customers, the baseline service in our budget today is 5-minute peak period service across the whole line. The concept would be to increase frequency between Grosvenor and Silver Spring to 4 minutes, with service frequency on the end of line segments of 8 minutes. The next concept is increasing service frequency on the Orange Line between Vienna and New Carrollton. A couple of features here. Historically, the ridership between the New Carrollton and Largo segments currently is roughly balanced, and in the past has been slightly higher on the New Carrollton segment. Current baseline budgeted service has roughly double the level of service on the Blue and Silver Line to Largo as compared to New Carrollton. And so there's an opportunity here to potentially add some trains and some frequency to the Orange Line to balance service on the eastern end of the system, as well as increase frequency in the Ballston corridor where there's potential for ridership growth. Also on the eastern end, it would improve connections to Amtrak to MARC and the future Purple Line. So what the concept the team has modeled is essentially increasing service frequency on the Orange Line from the baseline 10 minutes to a concept of 7.5 minutes. That would also lead to some increased frequency in the core between Roslyn and Stadium Armory, where the lines are interlined with blue and silver. We have also been examining opportunities to improve service time to the airport and to the new Silver Line Phase 2 and to the airport at Dulles, recognizing the long travel time from downtown and other parts of the system. That airport, we are limited, as you all know, by the two-track system and no ability to pass trains in service. So really the best we could do here in the near and medium near and medium term is increase travel times by 4 to 6 minutes, roughly 5 minutes, by skipping some stations on some Silver Line trains. So there's potentially some value here, more work and analysis to do on potential options for an express Silver Line service to the airport. And then finally, as I mentioned, we are conducting some planning and analysis of improving maintenance efficiency and effectiveness, with a potential opportunity in the future to change overnight and early morning rail service, as well as looking at late night bus service options as part of the Better Bus Service Initiative. So importantly, if the board and Metro were to move forward with service frequency improvements, as I mentioned, there's some synergy in improving frequency on multiple lines. And this is an example of how these things could fit together at the system level. And very powerfully here, changes to the green and yellow line frequency, the change in the optimization of the red line service, and increased frequency on the orange line could benefit well over half of Metro's existing customers, generate some new ridership of about 4 million trips, and negatively impact in terms of service frequency less than a quarter of our customers. So essentially an optimization that benefits well over half of our customers in terms of frequency and transfer capacity. Here we've just summarized each of the three major proposals. As I mentioned, the one with the most opportunity and benefits, both from a ridership and from an equity standpoint, are the green and yellow line frequency investments, followed by the red line service realignment and the potential increase in frequency on the orange line. We're continuing to evaluate concepts on blue orange silver optimization, that Silver Line Express, potential future investments in other parts of the system, as well as those late night and early morning hours on weekends. Lots of trade-offs, as I mentioned, a bunch of them, but they do include, of course, the availability of rail cars, the availability of the infrastructure, equity, ridership, cost, and of course, implementation timeline. And my last slide, the next steps here would be community, customer, and stakeholder engagement, discussion with the board today and in the future, and then obviously board consideration of updated concepts at a future date. That concludes my long presentation, Mr. Chairman. Happy to support the discussion.
Apparently it was. All right, thanks, Tom. Don't worry, everybody. I had seen it previously. So let me open it up for discussion first. Lucinda.
I actually just have a couple of comments. So first of all, thank you, Tom, and your team for all the work you've put into this so far. I just want to re-emphasize, you can't re-emphasize enough, that these are concepts for the board's consideration. They're not proposals. They're not anything that we're going to probably be able to move forward with for the FY24 budget. The service concepts, they're great ideas, but I believe that we all saw that pretty much every one of them resulted in a negative revenue impact. It wasn't until your wonderful slide towards the end where you integrated the service optimization concepts on the system level that we could then see that there would be positive revenue, so I appreciate that. I do want to talk about the fare structure and the zone concept. So as you may or may not know, DC had a zone concept for our taxi cab system, and it was one of the most confusing things, and especially for our tourists, because people who take taxis a lot are tourists. And so we eventually got rid of it, of course, and went to the distance-based concept. And I'm just concerned, I know you had the pros and cons, and a lot of people believe that the zone concept is easier to understand. In my opinion, that's only for people who live here and consistently take the metro, such that we then just memorize the different zones. But I'm concerned about our tourists and even people in the Maryland and Virginia area who don't come into the district often, maybe just for a ball game or something. So I definitely would want you all to consider in that concept the communication piece. How do we deal with communicating to both the residents that are close and take it all the time, and then those who don't, the tourists? So thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you. Dr. Lowe?
Thank you, Chair. Tom, one question. The green-yellow service optimization. Is the right way to understand this that this is basically transferring some of the interlining benefit from the northern part of the green line to the southern part of the yellow line?
It is not transferring service frequency. It is adding service frequency to the green and yellow line south of Mount Vernon. This concept would turn yellow line trains at Mount Vernon, but replace that frequency with green line trains north of Mount Vernon. So there'd be in this concept, no change to service frequency north of Mount Vernon.
Okay, so like, for example, someone who lives at, say, the West Hyattsville metro station, who remembers the bad old days of really long headways and has really been enjoying being able to get yellow line trains, their experience would remain the same because there'd just be more green line trains.
There'd be twice as many green line trains.
Sacred. Okay, thank you. That was really helpful. I think that these concepts should be on the table for FY24. Respectfully disagree. These cost almost nothing in terms of the big picture of WMATA's operating budget. One of these proposals is net revenue positive, the red line turnarounds. And so I think that per our multivariate discussion earlier, I think that there's a lot of moving parts here in terms of what if the fare went up, but the service was also better? I think that we need to think really holistically about this. So respectfully disagree. Let's continue the conversation. I think that we can't afford not to consider at least some of these proposals as soon as FY24.
Ms. Martin Proctor.
First, thank you so much, Mr. Webster. Your team, this whole presentation, I took lots of notes, but I'm only going to ask 3 questions and maybe follow up with you later because it was extraordinarily extensive and I do have questions about several of things. But I am in agreement with Dr. Lowe that I think that the ideas, they can serve as some sort of multi-layer or hybrid for the programs as we move forward with these discussions. But my first question would be about the low-income fare product. I'm presuming that there are some models that we've seen out there that have been successful. The key thing that I heard is that it increases ridership, and for me, it also increases equity and serviceability and aligns to one of our core principles here at WMATA.
Yes.
Okay, great. Second question, which actually ties in with what Councilmember Babel said with regards to our zone models. I'm not completely off board with that, but I would love to know if there was a successful model that took place with regards to this and what the customer feedback was on that.
In terms of a transition from a distance-based to a zone-based?
Yes. Do we have a case study?
Don't know that anyone has done that, but let me follow up with the team and find out what we can find out.
Thank you, and I would especially like to know what the customers thought about that, because as Councilmember Baker stated, I remember the zone tax.
We have to correct her to deputy mayor.
Deputy mayor.
Yeah, I don't know if that's an upgrade or down, I'm not getting involved in the DC, but
When would we have learnings?
Well, the team, so we have a fair amount of work on that. The team's working through that. I don't know if by next Thursday might be a little early. We're trying to, well, we have a committee meeting next Thursday. Just timing, our schedule is kind of, but certainly our goal here is to get more information out. And I hope the board is, we talked about this early. We are trying to be very transparent, really public facing about all this. So before we get to the general manager's proposed budget, we want to have all of this type of information out. So the team is working through that. There's some examples that have done this. And I think what's really important is there'll be city or an agency that we say have done this, and sometimes that's gone well, and sometimes it hasn't gone well. The key is how to take what various people have done and continue to learn from that. So, for instance, my last agency in Austin, we had a whole Equifair program that we just launched just before I left, and the whole idea was tied to, like for instance, if you got SNAP benefits, you got low-income fare. Other places do it a different way. It's transit, so literally no one does the same thing. But I know Tom's team is working through that, and we want to get out publicly before you get to a proposed budget of what kind of, that's what's so good about this conversation for us as staff, hearing these different comments and points of view, so we can end up having like more true scenario options to bring forward than bits and pieces right now.
Okay, but I'm on the low-income fare pilot that we are currently running.
Right. Well, let me just clarify that, because that is a pilot that the District of Columbia's lab is doing, which is in the Office of the City Administrator. They're still at least at a minimum a year away from completing that. So that is more long-term. And then let me clarify for you that I indicated that the service optimization concepts that were presented, all of those were pretty much negative. So on their own, that's nothing that we could consider for FY24. But then Tom and his team showed us that wonderful, if you integrate the service optimization on a system level, those are some things that, yes, we could probably look at.
Just my one last third point that I had a question on with regards to, and I know this isn't something that everybody wants to talk about, but it has been discussed at a lot of the transportation conferences, the whole fare free for all. How does that look? I know that increases ridership. It would require sustainable integration with regards to public sustainability. Everybody would have to kind of join in and put into the pot. Any thoughts on how optimal that might be?
So basically that is a fundamental shift in how our region thinks about funding transit. So certainly there are some advantages to full public investment in a free fare system, and tremendous ridership benefits. Obviously that's a much broader regional conversation than the staff here can drive.
Okay. Completely understand, totally appreciate that. And in addition to that, just so we end on a really positive note with my comments, I so still appreciate that even during this time, we still have the free rail to bus transfer. Because I remember when it was $2 when you had to get off the train to transfer to the bus, and it was $2. So I'm glad that we have kept that in place. It provides equity and sustainability for our community members.
let me go to Sarah and then Paul.
Thank you. A couple of questions. I mean, this is a great presentation, and one of the things, I know I was thrilled when we did the bus network redesign discussion, and I'm really excited to have this discussion as well, because I think that it's been a long time since we've thought about what the rail system could really deliver. Obviously, it's fixed infrastructure. It's, you know, it is where it is, but this is really eye-opening to me in terms of what more it can deliver. You know, I don't know if this is the right package or not, but I'm really glad it's on the table. And I'm really glad we're thinking about what this can be for the future. I don't love the zone fare idea. I honestly don't see the benefit of it over the distance-based fare that we have now, because essentially the way it is it's essentially distance-based, the way it's been conceived here, because it is distance from a central point that determines what zone you're in. So it's sort of a simplified distance-based fare, and I don't really see the benefit of moving that way, but in the interest of having everything on the table, I'm glad it's on the table. And maybe there's some more creative ideas as this goes out to the public. I'm sure there are additional creative folks thinking about how this could work and be beneficial for the region. Right now, I'm not seeing it, but maybe I will. I really, really appreciate that map that showed the increase in the access to jobs within 30 minutes from the service changes. I know that transit industry nationwide has been struggling with how to measure our performance, how well are we doing, and we usually just look at ridership. What are riders doing? But I think that access measure, showing where people could go within a certain amount of time and how that changes depending on what the service looks like, is a great metric. We should keep looking at that moving forward as often as you can. I think it's really helpful just to understand what we're talking about. On the fare side, and I'm jumping around because I wrote my notes all messy. All of the fare concepts that are listed as potential for FY24, are all of those technically able to be done in FY24 at the beginning or at just some point along the way?
So there are varying levels of complexity across that list. So the more complicated transitions would require some phasing. So something like moving to a zone-based fare system, our next fiscal year starts in 7 months. That's not realistic. But again, pricing changes are comparatively much easier and could be implemented. So it sort of depends on some of the trade-offs and the policy considerations within each element, how quickly technically we can implement, and then what the appropriate level of lead up and engagement is to implementation.
Okay, great. That's helpful to understand just how the two halves of what we're talking about today fit together. That's all my comments. Thank you so much for a great presentation.
Mr. Smebber.
Thank you. Tom, is there a concept D-1 where you don't have the peak off-peak?
Yes. So contained within concept D is the idea of either eliminating or simplifying the difference between our traditional peak fare and off-peak fare. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I mean, I have questions, but I'm just going to ask one, and then the low-fare income program. We just heard, the district is doing its pilot. They're several months out from this. What about from our perspective administratively? I mean, it could be a real administrative burden. And what are we doing to work or talk to the jurisdictions about maybe they are true partners in implementation of this program if it's something that we look at seriously? Because I don't know, I mean, just given everything, it could be really challenging.
Yeah, so there are design system or program design elements that could make it very complicated and very administratively burdensome. Or there's ways to design it that are much simpler, easier interface, easier administration, and then endless combinations of partnership and things like that. I think speed to having a program implemented would necessitate a fairly simple program design. Something that is more complicated would take more time and a larger administrative.
Yeah, and don't want to get into it now, but I'm also thinking each jurisdiction may have different goals or parameters in mind that could potentially complicate it. They may look at the program differently.
Chair, maybe I'll add a comment on that, relieve Tom of having to comment on that, but I think I appreciate what you're saying because, listen, I've been here 3 months now. I think we need to figure out how to run this organization as close as we can to a regular transit agency, not a amalgamation of a bunch of jurisdictions. And we have to, I think, figure out how to run our fare products in a way that are easy to use across the region because people move through jurisdictions that are political boundaries that don't really matter to their lives. And so I think what we could do is, if we want to move towards a low-income fare program, which, you know, is pretty industry, kind of the wind's behind the industry now, I think what's happened in the district is kind of a good example that we can maybe take what they've done and push that into a regional program. Our staff's point of view would be we would want to work towards a standard across the region and not having individual jurisdictions.
Yeah, I'm not saying,
I appreciate
I'm
that's why
just
you
putting
said
it out
that.
on the table.
Yeah.
I just want to know what you were all thinking about, how, you know, what went into the calculus to put this on paper. And
Yeah.
so, yeah.
That's why I appreciate the way
That's
you
all.
laid it out,
Yeah, yeah.
because it's a really important conversation.
Yeah.
And for ease of administration, it'll actually be easier internally for us to manage as one. So even if it's burdensome for us to manage it, ultimately will be more customer-centric and long-term easier to manage, even if the upfront is more complicated.
Yeah, and that, my question did not suggest, you know, those other things. I'm just curious, given things that we've had to deal with in the past. Okay.
Okay.
And appreciate it. It was good having all this information.
Yeah, Tom, thank you so much, because this is a really good deep dive at some topics that I don't know that the Metro Board has looked at in a while, so I'm glad that we have. On that distance-based discussion, our current formula is not truly distance-based today, right? Isn't there some kind of deviation, some kind of baseline, I don't, you know.
It is not a simple distance. There's these combination factors. So the distance is actually the average between the crow flies distance and the distance on the system.
The actual distance on the system.
And then the charges are different depending on how far you travel. So those are things that make it difficult for the average customer to figure out, if I'm going from here to here, how much does it cost?
Yeah, and so one of our goals with all of these discussions was to try to simplify our fare structure. And so I'm not quite willing to, you know, throw in the towel on zone base, even though I think looking at the particular examples here have lots of problems. You know, some trips end up in like 3 zones, even though they're relatively short. That wouldn't work. But that is a simpler process. I guess the question is, if we do some of the optimization on distance base, like we simplify a little bit if it's 25-cent intervals or whatever, have we really simplified it for the customer? I don't know if that's objective would be achieved or not. And so I'm cautious about trying to bite off too many things, like in one budget cycle in particular, talking about whether this stuff happens in 24 or 25. So that's just something to keep in mind. A couple other just general feedback things. The Silverline optimization stuff is interesting, and I think it helps answer some questions. I personally would rather see us go ahead and start the service, see what happens with the service, see how it's actually being used, which stations are getting ridership. It's my belief that a lot of the end-of-the-line customers may actually be utilizing some of these stations in Tysons and Reston and in between as for their commute, particularly because I'll note, and the chairman will appreciate, the Dulles Toll Road tolls are going up like some astronomical number in January. So all of a sudden that trip is much more expensive by car. So I think let's see what happens, and then this is something we can keep in mind for the future. But I also think we shouldn't limit our Silverline discussion in the future to just express service, but also be looking at ways to potentially align better with the airport and their operations. They have a lot of employees that have to get there early in the morning, for instance. Is there a way for us to look at something like that at some point? Again, not in fiscal 24, but those are the kind of conversations I'd like to have about that. And then the last thing I'll kind of raise is, so the obvious conflicts between the discussions we're having today, budget deficit plus service enhancements that cost money. And I am certainly open to having all those discussions. One of the questions is, we're assuming a 3% subsidy increase, which is our limit. I know that I've asked this, and I know the staff's looking into it, but would these potentially qualify for exclusions to the 3% subsidy because they are service enhancements? And then if so, I think the way to maybe frame this discussion about these service enhancements is with these funding partners, because we can demonstrate a clear improvement to all of them for the level of service we can provide for a relatively small amount of money, even in the subsidy, if you spread that out, looking at what that exclusion would be. So that's just an idea, and it might be a way to approach kind of the budget dialogue that we have with the jurisdictions. Okay. Any other questions or comments on any of these things? Then with no further business to come before the committee, we stand adjourned, and the board meeting is next. We'll take a 2-minute break prior to the board meeting to reset.
While the APTA International Bus Rodeo remains on hiatus, I'm pleased that our team was able to return to the competition this year locally and keep their skills finely tuned. So please join us in recognizing our first place winners. Our next group of honorees over the past few weeks, the MTPD has increased their patrols and presence in our stations, on trains, and on our buses. I commend their efforts, and we, the board, commend their efforts to keep our customers and employees safe and secure while on the system. Would you all stand, please? But today we want to recognize a group of MTPD detectives and officers for efforts that may not be as highly visible, but are just as important to keeping our customers safe. And in particular, we want to highlight a number of detectives and officers who are making arrests and closing cases. Detectives Egerton, Chavez, and Twentyman have made arrests involving assaults. And when an arsonist set fire on a train last month, Detective Chavez, in coordination with the DC Fire Marshal's Office and the U.S. Marshal's Task Force, arrested the suspect. Sergeant Minson was on the scene of a shooting that occurred at the L'Enfant metro station during evening rush hour, and his work led to apprehension of the suspect and the accomplice. And finally, this weekend, 2 arrests were made by Detectives Rodriguez and Smith related to the disturbing incident earlier this month on a bus. This work is a testament to the dedication of the men and women in our Criminal Investigation Division. We want to thank you and honor you here today. Thank you for your work. Now we'll ask the rodeo winners to come forward to the front so we can distribute these certificates and take a picture. Now we move on for public comment and reports by our advisory committee. But first, we'll hear from our customers and stakeholders. I'll ask staff to read any comments submitted. Mr. Pasek, I believe there are no comments been submitted. Or no, I mean no in person, right?
Nobody is here in person. We did have, I think, about 8 comments submitted online. We'll start out with Jack Huang. Dear Sir or Madam, my name is Jack Yukin Huang. I would like to comment on the root cause of train derailments at WMATA. The root cause of derailments is the problems from design and installation of the switch system or the truck train system. There are no forces large enough to permanently deform the axle longitudinally in normal operations. If you measure the wheel set dimensions accurately enough in the morning and the evening, the results will be different. So will be the results from next week, next month, and next year. Interesting enough, if you go ahead to measure the track dimensions in a switch system, you will find that the results are different from time to time. The NTSB states a train derailed and self-rerailed process. Question is how and why. Can the NTSB demonstrate how and why the train derailed? Rerailed. Comment, scientific attitude is needed in a derailment analysis, not the imagination like a joke. Thank you very much.
Our next comment is from Alex Tanzi of Montgomery County. Good afternoon. My wife and I are residents of the Brookdale neighborhood and live across the street from the proposed new location of the WMATA Bus Depot at the old Lord and Taylor location. I'm writing to ask the board, please make an effort not to use this location, or if it must be used, to shield the residential populations on Western Avenue, 45th Street, and Harrison Street Northwest as much as possible. The current entrance of the WMATA Western Bus Division is on 44th Street, which is commercial. The new entrance could and should remain on that street, and substantial efforts are needed to protect residential populations both in Washington, D.C. and in Maryland. Allowing the buses to use Western Avenue to access the lot would expose residential populations to much more toxic air pollution and noise pollution. The estimated risk is of getting cancer from this exposure to the bus depot is very high, and one that is not needed. I hope the board makes a good faith effort to move the depot to a less densely populated area. Frankly, the property and location are much more dense than when the bus depot was built decades ago. The new location is needed given the shift in the area. Thank you, and here are some links to see the hazards.
Next is from Tamara Schrader of the Huntington Community Association. Hello, I am the president of the Huntington Community Association and represent the community that is next to the Huntington Metro Station. We are writing to voice our concerns with the amount of waste and trash that is accumulating along Huntington Avenue. Given that the Metro Station is closed until sometime in 2023 and the location along Huntington Avenue will be heavily used for buses, we are asking for your help. Our main request is that larger trash containers be deployed along Huntington Avenue with more frequent pickup. The containers that are currently available for Metro users are always overflowing. This means that waste and trash are scattered along the roadway. We have a dedicated volunteer who picks up trash each day, and she cannot keep up with the amount of waste. She reached out to the Metro offices and was treated rudely and discounted for her request. Our community are heavy users of the Huntington Metro Station. We, the Huntington Community Association, are being asked to support your proposed choice of developing the Metro Station. We will be opposing this development given that even with small things such as trash, our community is discounted and dismissed. I'm available for contact via email or phone. I would invite someone from Metro to attend our monthly meeting held the first Thursday of each month to talk to our members about how Metro trash can be contained. Thank you for your time and would appreciate if you could reach out to me to discuss. I will be sending this contact form to our community so that you can also hear from other members of our community.
Next set of comments is from Sina Jaleta of Montgomery County. Please bring back the Z11 because I love that bus.
A lot. Next is from Maxwell Fisher of Fairfax County, Virginia. I am writing as a Northern Virginia resident who does not have a car and works out of Dulles Airport. When I transferred to the region, I was promised the train is on the way. It's been years and years behind schedule. I pay $30 per day easily to Uber to and from work. With the Metro, I would be paying $4. I would be using the train daily and it would be a significant improvement in my daily personal and work life. Gas is at an all-time high and travel often for work as well. We, the residents, are getting sick and tired of the political games you're playing. Being told it's operationally ready and yet can't open is a slap in the face of Northern Virginia residents, and I don't find it acceptable. You need to put out a timeline and get over this nonsense. I will do everything I can in my power to make our voices heard. I appreciate urgent action to open the extension immediately. Max Fisher. Next is from Steve Banashek of the Virginia Sierra Club. In a grand display of irony, the Metro Board is contemplating making service and personnel cuts to bridge the projected funding revenue versus budget gap while continuing to invest in compressed natural gas fueling infrastructure despite its relatively weak commitment to electrify the bus fleet. For the last 2 years, the Metro Electric Bus Coalition has been urging Metro not to waste millions of scarce taxpayer dollars on CNG fueling infrastructure at its Shepherd Parkway facility that the 2021 fleet management plan shows will be underutilized and unused not long after the Metrobus fleet begins to transition to an electric one. And in another display of irony, the Metrobus sustainability plan indicates that the initial deployment of electric buses will begin at Shepherd Parkway. CNG is a bridge to nowhere, locking Metro into volatile fuel prices, particulate pollutants, and 10 times more carbon monoxide emissions, and does little to reduce climate pollution. CNG bus life cycle global warming emissions are at most 6% lower than diesel buses and are nearly the same in many circumstances. And Metro can't greenwash its CNG expansion with renewable natural gas, if it can get it, because it doesn't change the fact that a CNG bus still emits particulate pollutants and a lot more carbon monoxide than a diesel bus, and leaks methane from the engine and gets fuel from leaky delivery pipelines. Our coalition, the DC Council, and 4 dozen other elected officials in the region have called on Metro to replace half its fleet with electric buses by the end of the decade and cancel plans to build new CNG fueling infrastructure at Shepherd Parkway. It's time for Metro to stop buying fossil fuel buses immediately and commit to electrifying the entire Metrobus fleet by no later than 2040.
The next set is from Timothy Oberlayton of District of Columbia. The Metro Electric Bus Coalition requests that Metro Ethics Committee publicly release the results of its investigation of Virginia Metro Board member Matthew Letourneau's conflict of interest. On June 15th, we asked the committee to determine if Letourneau's financial and workplace ties to the fossil fuel industry and his pronounced bias in favor of fossil fuel buses violated Metro Code of Ethics. If the committee found him to be in violation, he should recuse himself from all discussions and deliberations about the status of the Metro bus fleet. The Ethics Committee must meet behind closed doors on June 23rd to consider our complaint, but has not released its findings. We issued a memo on September 7th asking that those results be made public, but again, there has been no indication that the committee plans to do so. The Ethics Committee owes the public to be as transparent as possible. Mr. Letourneau himself would agree. After Metro's Ethics Committee declined to release the results of its investigation of the board members Jack Evans' conflict of interest 3 years ago, and it was Letourneau who formally requested that the findings be made public. We reiterate that we are not calling in question Letourneau's ability to continue serving on the board. However, in light of his direct ties to oil and gas industry, it is imperative that he recuse himself from participating in any discussions, deliberations, and discussions regarding the future of the Metro bus fleet. The public has a right to know the outcome of the committee's investigations to maintain its confidence that Metro board members are serving the public's interests, not the narrow interests of the oil and gas industry.
Next comment is from Elliot Nagin, the Union of Concerned Scientists, and the Metro Electric Bus Campaign. At the April 28th Metro Board meeting, board members asked Metro managers for periodic updates on their progress transitioning to a zero-emissions fleet. Since then, managers have provided no information, at least publicly, about the status of the Metrobus sustainability plan. Here are some questions the board should ask. What is the status of Metro's electric bus pilot project? A December 2020 Metrobus update stated that, quote, Metro will issue a request for proposals in 2020 to test and evaluate up to 14 electric buses at up to 3 garages. Did Metro order these electric buses? If so, when will they arrive? Metro has since announced that it will run the pilot at Shepherd Parkway. Has Metro installed electric chargers there? If not, when? How much money is Metro planning to spend on new diesel infrastructure at the northern garage, which is closed for renovation until at least fiscal year 2027? Why spend millions on diesel infrastructure when Metro plans to make Northern, which can house 150 buses, its first all-electric garage? In FY 2028, Metro plans to own at least 138 buses. What is the status of the new compressed natural gas fueling station at Shepherd Parkway? Metro plans to increase the percentage of CNG buses in its fleet, despite the fact that they are no cleaner than diesel buses. They emit significantly more carbon monoxide and hydrocarbons and, according to Argonne National Laboratory data, are responsible for at most 6% less life cycle global warming emissions than diesel buses. In many circumstances, they account for virtually the same amount due to methane leaks and worse fuel economy. There's additional comments from Mr. Nagin. He would have reached his time limit, so we will post these online. I believe, yes, I'm sorry. Our last comment is from Talib Din Ukta from the Metro Electric Bus Coalition on behalf of Northern Bus Barn neighbors. In May 2019, Metro moved all of its diesel buses from Northern Bus Garage to Western, Montgomery, and Bladensburg garages that now serve the system's busiest routes along 14th, 16th, and 7th Streets Northwest and Georgia Avenue up to Silver Spring. It's been closed since then for renovation and not expected to reopen until late 2027 or early 2028. According to a September 2021 Metro press release, Northern is slated to be the system's first all-electric garage, but Metro also plans to spend millions of dollars to install new diesel fuel infrastructure to house 150 buses. That means within a few years of its reopening, when all the buses at Northern are electric, Metro will have a vast array of stranded assets, including 2 5,000-gallon diesel fuel tanks, along with other tanks for antifreeze oil and transmission fluid, and separate tanks for waste removal. Metro will also be saddled with the cost of maintaining, monitoring, and complying with EPA and DDOE rules and regulations. Houston's 1,300 buses and Los Angeles' 2,200 buses are scheduled to be all electric by 2030. All of Seattle's 1,600 buses will be electric by 2035, and Chicago and New York, which have 1,900 and 5,800 buses respectively, plan to have all electric fleets by 2040. Most of those fleets are bigger than Metro's nearly 1,600 buses, but Metro won't be all electric until 2045. Smaller transit agencies in our region, the DC Circulator, Montgomery County's Ride-On, Alexandria's Dash, and Fairfax County are also way ahead of Metro. They will all be electrified between 2029 and 2035. No matter what Metro managers told the board last April, it's not too late to become a leader. Ground has not been broken at Northern. The Metro Electric Bus Coalition urges the board to cancel Metro's wasteful plans to reinstall diesel infrastructure at Northern and set the groundwork to truly be 100% electric when it reopens. That concludes our public comments.
Thank you, Mr. Pasek. And thank you for everyone who commented. I do want to respond to one of the comments from Mr. Oberleiten. Yes, the Ethics Committee did meet. We discussed every item outlined in the complaint against Mr. Letourneau. We did make recommendations to Mr. Letourneau. He responded, and we worked with the legal counsel staff. He complied with all the things. We put out a complete report, and that report was sent to the complainant on September 7th. So that information is out there. It's complete. So I suggest Mr. Oberleiten, as the lead attorney for that one group, talk to the other groups that they're coordinating with to get that information, or just, yeah. So anyway, all right. So next, we'll move on to our committees. First, we'll hear from the Accessibility Advisory Committee. Mr. Posner, welcome. I was under the impression, we were under the impression yesterday, or last month was your last meeting, but we were wrong. Mr. Posner, are you with us?
Well,
there you are, Phil.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
The Finance Committee meeting this morning. I'd like to express the AAC's gratitude to Dennis, Mr. Tunde, and Tom Webster for all the time they have spent with us on fair policy and capital improvements, explaining the cost and why things can or might have to wait to be done during sustainability. And I hate to try to add something to Tom's 50-slide presentation, but remind everybody when talking about Metro Access, on all of his slides and planning, the actual cost and fare box recovery of Metro Access is equal to the x-axis on the graph, whereas bus rail is way up. And also that even though ADA permits calculating Metro Access fares at twice the comparable bus rail fares, up to, but it doesn't have to be up to. It can actually be less than that, and it can be a fixed price. So that's all I have to say about finance. But this month we have been busy preparing for the new leadership, which is why you're stuck with me today, and starting to put together our work plans for the AAC, bus rail, and Metro Access. ADAP has appointed a new ombudswoman, Barbara Millage, who is last year's Hettinger Award winner, and has worked effectively with the AAC and WMATA staff as a leader of the low vision community in upgrading rail station lighting. During our meeting, members of the AAC participated with staff on a bus bridge tabletop exercise, and we spent a good portion of our meeting going over the data while discussing integration of the bus transformation project data with the WMATA Better Bus project. Steve Caffin, Doris Ray, and I participated with the bus transportation project, and Steve and Tino Calabri have volunteered to work with the new bus project. We started the process to elect new leadership and anticipate completing the process by November. We have begun work on our new work plan and look forward to visits from board members, WMATA staff, and leadership at the AAC, bus rail, and Metro Access subcommittees to refine the plan. The bus rail subcommittee met on October 11th and discussed the elevator escalator updates with Mr. Nisi. And we continued the bus network redesign discussion application with the staff of the bus transformation project, data and conclusions relating to service, equipment, funding, cross-jurisdictional collaboration for urban, rural, underserved areas as regards total trip, starting point to destination, to the bus, on the bus, and final destination. Metro Access met on October 18 and discussed the new Garmin GPS system as it may affect Where's My Ride with staff. New vehicle procurement was discussed, as well as the Metro Access service area for the Silver Line Phase 2, and also driver assistant to and from the vehicle were also discussed. There was a request for a visit from Mr. Letourneau, which would give him an opportunity to discuss integration of Metro Access with Loudoun County's planned paratransit once Phase 2 of Silver Line opens. Perhaps this might be similar to the current interaction of Star and Arlington with WMATA. This has been a lot. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate all that all of you do for us in making things accessible, affordable, and understandable. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
All right, does anyone have any questions? So Phil, we're going to be stuck with you a little bit longer. If you could just stay online, okay? Just for a few more minutes.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
I will.
Is that okay? Good. All right. Mr. Mayor, the Riders Advisory Council Chair wasn't able to join us at today's meeting, so he has submitted a written report on behalf of the committee, which will be posted online. And if anyone has any questions or comments, they can contact Jennifer and let her know, and they can be passed along. Now we'll move on to the chair's report. First, I want to start by thanking Metro staff, as well as Senators Warner and Kane, for their diligent work in safely getting more 7,000 series rail cars back in service this week. And a special note to, Teresa, Brian, Jamie, the team there. They're really worked really hard, to get us, to this point with that, that issue and, the challenges that, they've had over the years. So, in the last week. So thank you for all that diligent work, and Randy, of course. But really wanted to highlight that team in particular because they're the ones dealing with it day to day. So. And still more work to do. So, but at least we have a path forward. And as I said Tuesday, this is a really huge win for our customers, and it was great to be able to see more and newer rail cars on the system, and I know everyone is going to appreciate that. Next, I'd like to highlight some good news that the 6 stations that have been closed south of Reagan National Airport will reopen in November, restoring Blue Line service. I also want to thank our customers for their patience on this project and our partners at the Virginia Railway Express for extending free fares on VRE for the affected stations and zones. Finally, I'd like to recognize 2 individuals for their service to Metro and its customers and communities. First, I'll start with Chief Financial Officer Dennis Eneseke. The General Manager is going to have more words and a more formal recognition, but on behalf of the board, we would like to recognize Dennis. And as Mr. Letourneau said last month, Mr. Eneseke is leaving WMATA to return to his home in Chicago, and this will be his last board day. Dennis, on behalf of the board, want to thank you for your dedication and perseverance during an 8-year tenure here. Where is Dennis? Oh, there he is. Okay. I was like, well, as I see as Yatunde. There you are. Okay, yeah. And you successfully guided the agency through one of its most challenging financial times, and I know how challenging it was when I got here. I know my first meeting with Christian Dorsey, we sat there in the room listening to McKinsey and the report that you and Paul gave, and it was just hard to believe that we were where we were at the time, and all the changes that have taken place in those 8 years. Your leadership and commitment to restoring Metro's financial systems helped put us on a path to financial stability and sustainability, more importantly. And for that, we would like to say thank you for your service. Does anyone have anything else to add? But why don't we wait till after the General Manager does his thing, and then we'll come back. How about that? Next, I'd like to recognize longtime ACC Chair Phil Posner, who we're stuck with at this meeting. Phil, you there?
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay.
I'm very sticky.
Yeah. Phil was first appointed to the Accessibility Advisory Committee in 2008 and has served as the group's chair since 2017. In addition to his years of service as chair, Phil has served as the ACC's vice chair for 6 years. And as chair of the ACC 7000 Series Car Rail Subcommittee, which worked to ensure that Metro's 7000 Series rail cars, which represented a significant breakthrough from its legacy rail car fleet, would represent a major step forward for riders with disabilities. And I know a lot of work was done with that subcommittee, looking at those cars. In addition, Philip chaired the ACC's Fair Policy Working Group that developed solutions, including Metro Access Fare Calculator, to better help customers understand Metro Access fares. Phil, under your leadership, the ACC has taken an active role in advising both the board and Metro staff on ways to improve the system for customers and with disabilities. The ACC has been a constant and consistent advocate, not just for customers with disabilities, but for all of Metro's customers. You've done this by forming partnerships with local and national advisory groups to solicit their input and inform your recommendations. And your recommendations have been clear, consistent, and solutions-oriented, recognizing and anticipating challenges that would be needed to overcome if they were to be implemented. I would also like to say that as a fellow chair, it's clear from the way that all the members of the ACC speak with one voice that you've made sure to include everyone in your, to include all your committee members' perspectives as the group develop recommendations. And Philip, I think every time I've been to meetings and have seen, the work that you and the various subcommittees and committees have done there. How you've engaged with staff has been so collaborative and so proactive, and it really did make a difference. I know, Matt, you and I and others have been in elective office, Tracy, understand the importance of that, and if that model could only be carried out in some cases around the region, that would be great. So on behalf of the board, we're grateful for your thoughtful leadership and wish you all the best in your next chapter. Philip, anything you'd like to say?
Well, thank you. I am blushing and can only say anything that has been accomplished by the work of all the members of the committee and all of the WMATA staff and the board and the various GMs that we have worked with. Everybody worries about us in the elderly and disability community, and everything that is done for us is done for everyone. So thank you all very much, and I look forward to continue following you online, and you will enjoy the new leadership when you meet them next month. So thank you so much.
Phil, I just want to add that you have an incredible legacy here at Metro, and I hope that you are heading off to a well-deserved retirement where you will be comforted by that legacy every day. It's of course true that real leaders with big achievements get those things done in collaboration with a lot of people and many communities, and you embody and exemplify that in every way. And your legacy is something that we all get to enjoy, and that I'm so happy we have this moment to celebrate.
Thank you, and I will point out that I plan on spending a lot of time in the Virginia, DC, and Maryland area in the next several years and using Metro Access and bus and rail. So please, keep moving forward and stay sustainable.
All right, thank you, Philip. Take care.
I shall.
All right, that concludes my report. Now I'll turn the floor over to the GM, Mr. Clark, for his report.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, board members. Good being with you all today. For my October report, we are going to start off. I see some blushing from Dennis over there, but if we're gonna embarrass him, let's go all in. Don't we agree? Okay, yeah, I agree. No sense doing it half around here. All in. So, Dennis, on behalf of the entire staff, I know the board just mentioned it, but also on behalf of the staff, we really are going to miss you, and we want to thank you for your incredible time here at Metro. And I'm going to read off a couple things that Dennis, I think, has accomplished that I think, you know, there's the visible stuff that the public sees, right? Trains and buses and all of those types of things. But they have to work behind the scenes. Chrissy, just wait 1 second. There you go. We gotta bring some drama here to embarrass him. Yeah, okay. So Dennis has been with us for 8 years, and as the chair mentioned, I think it's an understatement to say the financial conditions at Metro at that time were in need for drastic improvement. And Dennis's leadership and stewardship brought that. So the kind of things I'd like to highlight here, obviously, kept WMATA going through the pandemic. The whole staff, but obviously the financial pressures alone and Dennis's leadership on that. Office consolidation, including this headquarters building, happened with Dennis's leadership, ultimately saving Metro millions of dollars so we could put that money back into the service for our customers in the community, and advancing that LEED certified element as part of our buildings. Launching of the UPass program for student customer base, and in that whole promotional of transit and partnership. Our 99-year ground lease at the Metro headquarters, Dennis and his team led that as well. And part of that is the first ever strategic plan for joint development, which is a national model for transit around the country. So just incredible work there. Some of those joint development projects have already resulted in $123 million in new revenues, which is pretty impressive. And the financial side, over $2.5 billion of bonds have been issued under Dennis's leadership. And that was, and 1.6 billion of that was actually through the new capital dedicated funding, which Dennis helped the previous general manager and team really work through the strategy and the financial analysis to get there. So, Dennis, it's an understatement. We are going to miss you. We are confident in Yatundi's leadership, filling in as the acting CFO. But a lot of people think very highly of you. I very much enjoyed the 3 months I've had the opportunity to be with you. You made a big impact in transit, not just here at Metro, and you're well regarded by everyone in this organization across the industry. So if you would come up and, actually, I guess I'll defer to if you'd like to make any kind of comments, and then I'm going to have you come up. Okay, we'll have Dennis, would you please come up? We have a couple things. One, we have a beautiful, Metro pylon, but it's out of glass and it's really nice. And then we have, for ultimate embarrassment, we have a cake. And we couldn't put your whole face on it, so we're wishing you well. So thanks, come on up and let's do a big picture with the board. So thank you, Dennis. Well, here, does anyone want to say anything? No.
I just want to say how instrumental Dennis has been to me in my short time here on the board, but he's really helped DC government, and he's still helping in his last week, and he knows what I mean.
Yeah, I'll just say, obviously, as finance chair, I work with Dennis closely, and I really appreciated that time and all the work that we've done together. So thank you, Dennis.
Dennis, as you ascend to Valhalla on the wings of a clean audit, I hope that you never think about us and the problems you're leaving behind. Thank you so much for everything that you've taught me, including indirect cost rates.
We just want to thank you so much for your service, not just to Metro, but to the citizens of the DMV. You're going to be greatly missed. You are our behind-the-scenes warrior, and I want you to always remember that Metro will be here for you whenever, those cold Chicago nights. You're always welcome back.
I mean, I'll just echo what everybody has said. We've seen lots of financial slides since I've been here for about a year, and every single one of them was clear and understandable, and I just can't say how much I appreciate that. So thank you, and good luck with everything in the future.
Yeah, Randy, one bullet we should add to any proclamation or anything we write up, it is about the audit. And that's another piece. And like you said, we can't underestimate the financial sort of situation Dennis walked into, which he knew he was walking into. And it really was striking that first meeting when Christian and I sat there. Now, you were here for a while already, but still, it was pretty dire. And it was challenging at best. And so you had that situation, and then just getting an audit completed on time, and all the work that went into that. So two major accomplishments there, for sure. So thank you. Like it
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, board members. This has been truly, truly overwhelming. I am humbled by just standing here with all of you Working at Metro has been a labor of love for me, and as I go, I will continue to work in any way possible. I've already shared this with Randy. I am invested in Metro's success, and the work that Randy and this board is doing will truly transform this organization. So, good luck and best wishes.
All right, back to the general manager report. So, but thank you all for joining and wishing Dennis well. Next up is some October highlights. I think it's fair to say October was a busy month. I'll be honest, the last 3 months have been 3 busy months. But the last month, a lot of great things have happened here at Metro, and I want to highlight those. So one, we had our ridership is continuing to go up. We had our highest day at 312,000 on rail and 323,000 on bus. So we are noticing our trend analysis. Slowly but surely, ridership is increasing. And we expect that as we bring back more service, that ridership will continue to grow. As you'll notice on this slide, a few things I want to kind of highlight here. Metro Bus graduation and our acting Senior Vice President of Bus Operations, Leroy Jones, you can see him in the picture here. This is another group of bus operators. We have more people in training, I believe it is, than we've ever had for size of classes. That is stressing the training team a little bit, but they are working incredibly hard. And this is really highlighting to our customers that we are doing everything we can to rebuild the entire ranks of operators so we can deliver the full budgeted service. So I know that there's still some stress out there depending on the route, and we are working every day to get back into full service to provide that frequency and reliability that people are looking for. Had a great opportunity to go down to USDA headquarters with board member Klein, alternative board member and Brian was with us too. Yeah, I'm trying to see who else was in the picture. And Regina Sullivan, our government affairs officer, down to see Secretary Buttigieg and Deputy Secretary Polly Trottenberg and FTA Deputy Administrator as well. And the idea here was to give an update on what's going on at Metro, and just talk through kind of a future plans and really appreciate the Secretary and Deputy Secretary's leadership, both on infrastructure nationally, but obviously at Metro locally. They are very invested in Metro being successful, and looking forward to hopefully getting them out on the system in the near future. Our Clean Sweep program, as I think it's getting closer to completion. Yeah, hopefully you all notice out on the stations, really deep cleaning. The team has done an amazing job. Now, of course, our job is to get to that standard and keep it there. I've been incredibly impressed by our custodian staff at this organization. And not just the work they do, the pride in the work is great. So they know I'm out on the system a lot, and I run into people at 9 or 10 o'clock at night and 7 in the morning, and I'm just really impressed by the hard work that they are all doing. On this slide, you also notice that we've started our fare warning program, and next week we're looking to actually implement the ticketing component. We've done, I think, a really concentrated, deliberative effort to do warnings first. We've been talking about this now for several months, if not 3 or 4 months. The last month and a half, these signs have been out. We have had officers actually engaging people as they come through the gate if they are not paying their fare, and handing these warnings out. We are doing everything we can to get people to comply without being confrontational. At the same time, we are making it clear, starting we'll announce next week, that we need people that have the ability to pay their fare to pay their fare. And we've heard this is a very complex topic around the region. Quite frankly, it's probably good for everyone to avoid Twitter on this topic, because for every one person that says one thing, someone will say something else. To me, we're just going to have our rules. We're going to enforce our rules, but we're going to do it in the most humane way possible. And I think we've been trying to try to find that balance. So again, our message is just please, if you have the ability to pay your fare. The middle picture is really an exciting event, and Board Member Drummer and Secretary Ports were actually able to join this event as well. And this was the groundbreaking at Hitachi's new plant in Maryland. And this is for our new 8000 series trains. So very exciting that our new rail vehicle will be built here in the region, providing jobs locally and tying our region together. So I think we'd all love those 8000 series vehicles tomorrow for obvious reasons. With that said, this is a long-term investment in our region economy too. So we're really looking forward to that partnership with Hitachi. On the next slide, some other really important things that happened in October. We had some officers and detectives here today, and I appreciate the board recognizing their hard work. We had another officer graduation class. It was Metro Transit Police Department's 123rd graduation class. I believe we had 12 or 13 officers in that group. It takes almost a year for a police officer to be actually certified because of our tri-party jurisdictional kind of complexity. These are men and women that have decided to commit themselves to public service and serving their community, and we're really proud to have them on board and choosing Metro. It is very complicated and challenging to hire law enforcement in America right now, so we're really excited to have new officers on board. We have another cadet class that's in process right now as well. So I want to give a lot of credit to the chief and his command staff. They are being nimble, flexible, adaptable. Hope you've all seen a lot more officers out on the system. Our goal is to have them more visible. They're in high vis, they're on buses, they're on trains, they're in stations. Again, we're trying to do everything we can to ensure that safety of our system. And if an incident does happen, as you recognize the detectives today, I think we're trying to make it crystal clear to people that might want to do illegal behavior in anywhere near the Metro system. We are watching you on video. We have a fantastic police department, and we are going to catch you and get you to the prosecutors to hold you accountable. So please just stay out of our system if you have ill intent, because we have a great public safety approach to hold you accountable. So just really appreciate all the work the chief and his team is doing on that. Lastly, yesterday had the opportunity across the entire rail vehicle maintenance and engineering departments. We want to recognize the fantastic work they've been doing to keep the legacy fleet going, and also all of the really complicated work on 7Ks, the back-to-back measurements, the breaking of 8-car trains into 2s and measuring them and reassembling, and with all these different yard shutdowns. To say the vehicle maintenance team has had a hard year would be an understatement. They have just nonstop work to keep the rails people moving on the rails, and I appreciate Board Chair Smedberg came and joined me. This picture's from Alexandria Yard, but we served a pizza thank you at every one of our rail maintenance facilities yesterday, during the day, and then last night to recognize their great work. So going back to that theme, we have a great staff of talented people, and we're going to continue to find creative and unique ways to recognize our staff for the good work that they do day in and day out serving their community. The next slide would be our bus network redesign. And I think the last meeting, everyone was both excited, thrilled. There's a lot of adjectives that were thrown around on that. And I think it's fair to say the staff is as well. So I want to thank Board Member Drummer, Board Member Lowe, Board Member Klein. You all came down to our kickoff event at Anacostia. It was busy. We had so many people engaging. We've already had 7,100 people engaged on the bus network redesign. Over 2,500 people have taken surveys. I've done one myself. Hopefully you all would do that as well, if you're using the bus system. This is our chance to take a fresh look at a bus network that really hasn't had a serious touch in probably almost a half a century. So our region is dynamic, it's changing. Our network has to change with that to better serve our community, both residents and visitors. And so we think this is a big deal for us. I know we talk a lot about 7Ks and 8Ks and station construction, a lot of money being spent in those areas. The bus is the backbone of our system. And now that we've kind of got a pathway for 7Ks, I think it's fair to say that myself and the COO will be spending an enormous amount of time on the bus operation side, because I think we have some easy, low-hanging wins to move a couple things forward while we work on this larger, more complicated bus network redesign. So on the board side, I would encourage you, please share this information with all your networks. Let us know if there's parts of your networks that need more information, and we can contact them. The more people engaged in this process, we will have a better outcome. As we said before, no matter what we do, somebody will be upset because change will be hard. The key here is, how do we serve our community best going forward? And the more people are involved, a more inclusive process will lead to a better result. Next slide is Potomac Yard. I know that both the board, the staff, the community, everyone's a little disappointed that we've had a little bit of delay on this project. It is a very complicated project, much more complicated than I even realized until I got here. I think the picture on the left would show you this, that is a pretty complex piece of track work where that's being built. So we had some soil conditions that we did a lot of geotechnical work, but pretty hard to do geotechnical work under where the actual operating rail line is. That's what happened. Andy and Liz and the entire delivery team went out, resolved that topic, and now all of our internal infrastructure, both power, tracks, signals, is working with the capital delivery team. Made a lot of progress. We put a video out the other day with the first train running through Potomac Yard Station, and we were advancing through all of our testing. So you'll notice here, our confidence level is at about a 99% that we will be back on schedule on November 6th. I leave that 1% in the last 2 years with COVID showed us, who knows, something that we can't plan for, but everything that we are trying to account for, we are in good shape to be back into service on November 6th. So we're going to keep pushing. By early December, we plan to be able to come back to the board and publicly commit to an actual opening date in 2023 for Potomac Yard Station. So again, I know it's been a little delayed and frustrated for people, but it is an amazing station, and it's going to help change this region forever. Last but not least is Silver Line. Now, I know there's some cameras in the audience, and we have all of our reporters here, and everyone's waiting for a date. You'll see at the bottom of the slide, opening date coming soon. So I'm sorry to disappoint everyone waiting, or half the media said, I got sent here to report on a date. Trust me, we can't wait to issue that date as well. I want to thank our partners at the WMSC, also, as the chair mentioned, Senator Warner and Senator Kane, for their fantastic leadership and effort. The 7K return to service plan resolves that complication inside of what we mentioned earlier. That will allow us to have the trains available to run the service. So that is a big green checkbox. That is fantastic. With that said, we still have to get our final concurrence on our safety certification. I want to thank the WMSC. Our team has been meeting with them on a daily basis, including a call yesterday. I think they have one again tomorrow. We're down to just a handful of items left. I would call them I wouldn't call them necessarily punch list, but very minor in the scheme of the size of the project. Some of those items are things like a couple pieces of signage are missing in one area, or there's a light missing in one area, or aligning a ladder, those types of things. Certainly, we need to have those done to open service, but they are not large construction or systems kinds of issues. So the WMSC and our team is working hand in glove, and we look very much forward to announcing a date. We believe that we'll be able to probably announce a date next week to get these trains running and to serve this region. I know a lot of you have been waiting for this for a generation, and we can't wait to get people on board so they can get out and get on their flights and see another part of this great region. So with that, Chair, that is the General Manager report. Happy to take any comments or questions. Also happy to continue to roll in the meeting, however the board wishes.
Any comments or questions for Mr. Clark? Okay, hearing none. Thank you. Now we'll move to the report of the Finance and Capital Committee. Mr. Letourneau.
Okay. The following item was referred to the board at the October 13th Finance and Capital Committee, authorization for dedicated revenue bond sale. Staff requested authorization for the negotiated sale of Series 2023A dedicated revenue bond in the amount of $392 million to support Metro's capital program. Mr. Chairman, I move approval.
We have a motion on the table by Mr. Letourneau. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Lowe. Any final comments or questions on this item? Hearing none, Ms. Ellison, please administer the vote.
Chair Smedberg?
Aye.
Vice Chair Babers?
Aye.
Vice Chair Ports?
Aye.
Ms. Klein?
Aye.
Mr. Letourneau?
Aye.
Dr. Lowe? Aye. Ms. Martin Proctor? Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to the consent calendar. I would like to move approval of the following items. An amendment to the joint development agreement for the Jackson Graham Building. Staff seeks authorization to amend the joint development agreement and related documents with Square 487 Associates, LLC, for the redevelopment of the Jackson Graham Building at 600 5th Street Northwest. Second, amendment to the WMATA retirement plans for Secure Act compliance. Staff seeks approval of amendments to the retirement and deferred compensation plans for Metro's non-represented employees to comply with setting every community up for retirement enhancement, the Secure Act of 2019. Third, an amendment to the joint development policies regarding unsolicited offers. Staff seeks approval of amendments to Metro's joint development policies regarding unsolicited officers. Specifically, staff will inform the board of any unsolicited offers that they intend to pursue, and proposed joint development agreements, JDAs, arising from those unsolicited offers must be brought to the board for approval. I'd like to move approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Deputy Mayor Babers. We have a motion and a second. Any comments, questions? Hearing none, Ms. Ellison, please administer the vote.
Chair Smedberg?
Aye.
Vice Chair Babers?
Aye.
Vice Chair Ports?
Aye.
Ms. Klein?
Aye.
Mr. Letourneau?
Aye.
Dr. Lowe? Aye. Ms. Martin Proctor? Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you. Now we have the reports by the jurisdictions. Mr. Letourneau, I don't have anything for MBTC.
No, we're just finalizing our report to the General Assembly, and I also think it's worth noting that the Commonwealth Transportation Board certified that Metro has met the parameters set forth in dedicated funding to fully qualify and receive that funding.
Yep. Thank you. That was a unanimous vote. Yeah. The District of Columbia, Ms. Babers.
Thank you, Chair. Well, you know, we love to invite the region to our open streets. So our last open streets for the year is November 5th, a Saturday, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. It's going to be on Wisconsin Avenue for a mile from the Western Avenue to Tinleytown. And of course, there are two Metro stations readily available, the Tinleytown Metro and the Friendship Heights Metro. So please, everyone, come out, walk in the middle of the street, bike, run, and have some fun.
Okay, thank you. WSTC, Secretary reports. Any reports?
Nothing at this time, Mr.
Thank
Chairman.
you. Thank you. And for the federal government, Ms. Klein.
Yeah, I just want to say to all the federal employees out there, if you can get to one of those Better Bus pop-up events, do it, because that was the most engaging bus-related outreach event I have been to. Now, that might be the only one, but it was really good. The outreach folks who are there and the methods that they use, it's not just like a straight-up interview. They had stickers and things to fill out, and you can take as much or as little time as folks want. And I don't know, Rand, if you know how those are on the website, the dates of those events are on the website, and they run through, do you remember when? A couple weeks from now? November 11th, I hear. So anyway, in any case, the bus network redesign is going to be so important for the whole region, as well as the federal government and all the workers who use the system. So thank you for that. And Ms. Martin Proctor, do you have anything you want to add?
Just real briefly, I just want to bring awareness to the fact that Metro is doing surveys, and if you receive a survey, please turn it back in. We don't know what we don't know. We want your feedback. We want everybody in the community to be able to provide their input. And if you receive a survey and it's not accessible to you, and if you need it in a different format, reach out to us at romana.com, and we will make sure that you get it in the format that is needed. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. All right, with no other business to come before the board, we'll stand adjourned, and the board will reconvene in executive session. Thank you all very much.
Are we having cake?